Hello again. If you've been watching this series, I hope that you had a chance to look at the first video clip where we talked about the power of being in the here and now and this idea of emergent phenomena. And I think it's important to have that as an orientation to what we're going to talk about now, which is more how do you put it into practice and what are the parts. As a way to kick it off, I think a really good question to kick off our conversation is, Marianne, as you think about doing your work today, and maybe if you can think back to before you went to Gestalt training, what's different because of your grounding in Gestalt in the way you do your work, and how has that paid off for you?
I'd say that the two things that came to my mind when you said that were, one, I feel like the whole arena of what's going on in me and the awareness of that has opened up logarithmically.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have a lot more access to possibilities and parts of me and my interior experience in relation to what the client's bringing up. The second thing is that I feel like this training has moved me from being overly focused on the exteriors of the client.
Yeah.
And what they're saying, necessarily the content, to really, again, opening up almost logarithmically access to their interior world and what are the thoughts, feelings, motivations, attunements that are all happening that if we open them up, give us a lot more raw material to work with.
Yeah. I think if we're not comfortable knowing enough about our own interior, the unknowns of what might come up with somebody else and what to do with it might be a little scary. So this idea that you start with yourself is an important principle in this. The power of Gestalt is this appreciating that my experience informs how I might probe yours as long as I respect it as yours. I don't know if that is well said or not, but would you elaborate on that at all? Or?
No, I think that I think it says it very well.
Yeah. And so when you prepare to do this work, how do you prepare?
I think one thing I do to prepare is I try to take, a little bit of time. It could be 10 seconds, it can be a minute, to just try to a little bit be aware of and release a little bit, whatever I'm kind of carrying into the session with me. It might be, the day residue or what I'm worried about coming up, and trying to make some space, just kind of clear the space to kind of be more attentive to what's happening in me and what's happening in the client as I approach. So trying to clear the field a little bit. So I try to get a little centered and grounded, relax a little bit, deep breath, and try to really see and sense from a kind of a quieter place as I start out.
Yeah, and I sort of think of that as just finding your calm energy, which is so hard. Our lives are so much like a whirlwind, I think. I also think there's pressure as a consultant, I know I feel it, where I'm working with a client and I got to get somewhere by 4:30. We need to get a decision made, we need to get closure. And I find that pressure makes me want to rush, and then I'm not in the moment, and I have had to work hard to say, if we're ready to get there, we will. And if we're not, then getting there in a fake way isn't going to help us, and we're going to do rework. So it doesn't help to deny this process. But I have to talk myself down because I feel that anxiety. We've got to finish. If we open it, we have to close it. And I think particularly in a lot of business organizations, that pressure is very strong.
Yeah, and I think there's something about the experience that someone would get by coming through a program like this, where you have it a little bit more in your gut and in your body about what it's like when you do slow it down enough to really get it in you, that then that supports the energy to go forward in a really depthful way, as opposed to kind of, here's the paper, run out, follow the instructions.
One thing that Gestalt trained me to do, or helped me to learn to do, and then I had to build as a practice to train myself to use it, is this idea of, because I think as a consultant I want to give advice. I'm here to be the advice giver, and so you shouldn't do this or you should do this, or to just really just say, no, that is not your job. Just put that aside and just make a descriptive observation. Like, I've been in a meeting where I've just said something like, everybody seems to be talking very fast, and I don't know how much people are absorbing what's being said. And just a statement. And and again, I would have said, you're talking too fast, and we can't get to this unless you kind of slow down, and then you have to really listen to each other. Remember, active listening, use that skill. Well, that's all up here.
Right, right.
And the observation makes people stop and reflect.
Yes.
And I would never have done that before I had this training. Are there other things that you can think of that you do that you can directly trace back to some of this work as well?
Oh, I think, your example is a great one. I think the power of, sometimes the power of the obvious.
Yeah.
That it's not so obvious to the person who's,
In
or the group
middle.
that's doing it.
Yeah.
And just sometimes that reflection of, gee, we're all talking at the same time, or what's the
Yeah.
impact of that, or are we aware
Yeah.
of, sometimes just
Yeah.
puts people into a reflective, as opposed to
Yeah.
an action place, a reflective
Yeah.
place. And as you were talking about in that last video, then there's the chance for something new to emerge.
Yes.
Oh, we're not just headed, we're not listening to each other. So a new awareness starts to form, out of which
Yeah.
a new, hopefully,
Yeah.
deeper action can
Yeah.
follow.
There's I think a powerful piece about the way what's feeding a lot of that speeding up and avoidance of going below the line or being more present in the moment is just sheer anxiety. People are scared they're not going to figure it out. It's not going to work. Somebody has expectations we're not going to be able to meet. And so we're all slaves to these things that create this fear. And so I think this idea of doing things that get others into a calmer energy, and I think you can really help if you're tuned into the energy in the room, which is what this training helped me do. I can really follow the energy, not necessarily just the subject.
Just
Yeah.
that I think the power that I've seen of this is, again, it's a little bit that go slow to go fast,
Yeah.
but it's go slow in a certain direction. It's go
Yeah.
slow. It's
Yeah.
access your own interior.
Yeah.
Help people
Yeah.
access
Yeah.
theirs in a way that the
Yeah.
group can hear a little bit about it, and it just allows me to have a sense of, oh, this is where we are. So there's a chance then for a we to move forward
Yeah.
in a certain direction. So it's a kind
Well,
of...
that's just it, isn't it? Like, I have my world, you have your world, and we can attempt to understand them and develop empathy for them, a platform of empathy through some common experiences. But then it gets really complicated when we put a lot more characters in.
Absolutely.
And it's like all this stuff is pumping out at the same time. Oh my God, there's so much going on, you can't keep track of it.
It's like we talked about the last time about, like, what's figural, what's standing out,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you have 34 different
figure frenzy.
in the room. And
Yeah.
that, I think, is one
Yeah.
of the things that I learned here that was particularly helpful, was
Yeah.
how in a group, how do you work, again, taking a little bit of time
Yeah.
to get some of those individual
Yes.
reflections in the room to start to see how can they shape up into a we.
Right. Which is different than saying, we're going to vote on the one, or, gee, I hear this as the facilitator, so I think this is the one you should choose.
Yeah.
No, they have to go through the journey of finding the common ground, seeing where they link, choosing that this is the time to do this. This may be important to them, but they have to set it aside. And that's a dialogue process. You can only do that through dialogue.
Yeah.
I also wanted to comment that this difference between the above the line content, we can have common data, but it doesn't mean we have common meaning.
Right.
And for me, common meaning comes from this exploration of my interior. And I have to be willing to be authentic and transparent, and it means being vulnerable to do it, but I have to say, this is what really matters to me if we're going to find a satisfying place to land with our final decision. And again, I think Gestalt helped me not see my role as giving them the words or doing their work for them around that, but to really be curious.